Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at a pretty big update to what is currently my favorite AI image upscaler. And I know that's a pretty weird thing to say, like how exciting can it actually be? It's an upscaler, right? It just makes things bigger. But I think when you see it, your head will start spinning into a lot of creative uses. We'll take a look at some controversial AI art news coming out of one of the world's biggest card games. Some 1.0 Holodeck news. It's not quite here yet, but we can see it just on the horizon and it is pretty exciting. And we'll round out with some insider tips and tricks on creating consistent characters in Scenario, which I covered in the last video. Okay, let's dive in. So Magnific, who I have covered on the channel in the past, have released an update to their upscaler, allowing for ×16 upscales or up to 10,000 by 10,000 pixels. It's a lot. To give you an idea of what that looks like, Phofor created this video, kind of this sci-fi-esque image of, everything being sucked into a black hole. As we zoom in here, you can kind of see like we've got these land masses, waves that are kind of crashing in. As we pull out, we see some clouds and atmosphere. But here's where things get crazy, is now as we start pulling back, we see the actual size of the entire image. And I mean, that's massive. It's really, really big. Still going. That's really crazy. It's a really cool image too. Another cool and creative example from Martin Nebelong. This is a sculpt that he put together in PS5's Dreams. And as you can see, he's alternating back and forth between the resolution of the original image and what Magnific has done to it. I mean, that is pretty insane how closely it ends up zooming in and retaining and creating details. Briefly, the way it works is you will upload an image to Magnific, obviously. From there, you can choose to 2x it, 4x it, 8x it, or 16x it. Now, a quick note on that 16x is that you are still limited by Magnific's 10,000 by 10,000 pixel cap, though that is pretty huge. From there, you have a number of different presets that you can choose from, anything from standard to science fiction horror. For this, we'll be going with Portrait Soft. Underneath that is a prompt box in which you can reuse the same prompt that you used before. For example, this is a Midjourney V6 image. I could just take that same prompt and bring it in. But you will note that you can actually weight that prompt as well by using a parentheses, say in the example here, it would actually work well. Beautiful green eyes, and then weighted at like 1.3, 1.4, 2 even, and then close parentheses. From there, we move down to the slider section. I probably should have mentioned this earlier. If you're stressing out about this VIP only thing, don't worry about it. This feature is supposed to be live later today for everyone. And trust me, I am not a VIP. Anyhow, the first slider is creativity. And this is where I think Magnific really gets its spank. By turning the creativity up, you're basically giving Magnific the ability to hallucinate over your base image. So it will create additional details. Sometimes those details are super awesome. Sometimes they're a little bit weird. For now, we're not going to go too crazy with it, though I will turn that up in just a little bit. The second slider is HDR, or high dynamic range. Resemblance is the slider in which you can control how much Magnific sticks to your original image. So if you turn it up, Magnific will try to adhere as much as possible to your original image, though possibly at the cost of some blotchy looks or kind of a dirtier overall look. Whereas turning it down gives Magnific permission to kind of get a little fuzzy with the details. Fractality is the new slider, and basically what that does, by lowering the fractality, you will end up with less details, but you are prone to less glitches. Whereas if you start cranking the fractality, you're basically giving Magnific permission to start making up details, which can work in your favor or can get super weird. There is an example of a rose here. So this isn't too crazy, but as we can see, if we look at the center of the rose here, there aren't a lot of water beads, but after we take it through a super upscale, we end up with this where, you can kind of see additional details on these water beads. It's very much like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting, doesn't it? So going back to our model here, I didn't go too crazy with prompting or the sliders on this one, but you can see that there is definitely a difference after running it through a creative upscale. The hair texture, I think, looks a lot better, not quite as soft. The eyes definitely pop a lot more, and the skin tone, I think, looks a lot better as well. But this is actually the thing that kind of will blow you away. So it's always kind of hard to wrap your head around exactly how big a upscale is. So this is our Magnific upscale, obviously, and on another layer, that is our Midjourney upscale. So yeah, it is pretty significant. So at 100%, this is where we are on our Magnific upscale. So that is pretty remarkable. Is there someone? Oh, that's kind of cool. Actually, in her reflection, you can actually see a photographer, or at least someone presumably taking that photo. That's pretty wild. I did notice that there was kind of one little background artifact here. Not that huge a deal. You could easily just clone or paint that out. So just to give you an idea of things that you can do by merging upscaling and creativity within Magnific, I ended up taking a sort of a reference from an Italian Renaissance painter named Pinaricchio, I believe his name is, sort of like this style of imagery, bringing it into Midjourney, using it as an image reference, and then adding in prompts for kind of a fantasy look, and we ended up with this, which is pretty cool. And this is the non-upscaled Midjourney version. And then running it through Magnific's creative upscale with an upscale factor of 8. Just if you look at the difference just between here and here, you can see how much more it actually ends up cleaning up the image. It's really when you zoom in that you see exactly how much detail Magnific is capable of putting in. I mean, that's pretty insane. Just for reference, this is the non-upscaled Midjourney image in that same area, you know, punched in as well. Now, it does change things. You'll note that, like, in this, we have this, you know, fire and kind of a blurry painting going on here, whereas on the Magnific side, it actually filled in the painting, which is pretty impressive, and then created, I guess, kind of like this opulent golden plant sculpture. Seems very appropriate for the time, I guess. But it really is interesting just to kind of zoom in on certain areas just to see what Magnific decided to do. I mean, some of it's weird, there's no question there, but I mean, a lot of it is really cool as well. Now, I don't want to overly sell this as like an absolute fix for everything. For example, I took a Midjourney image of Times Square from sort of a bird's eye view and ran it through Magnific. And yeah, I mean, it looks, you know, it did its job, but it's not going to do something like zooming like super in and turning all of these people into real people. They're still going to be sort of blobby people. Not quite as bad as like maybe the initial Midjourney output. I mean, granted, this is zoomed in like 500%, so I don't know of anything that's going to handle a crowd scene like this and be able to generate characters, you know, throughout this whole scene. But I will note that it does some really nice stuff to like street textures. So this is the before Midjourney image and the after Magnific image. But in terms of those blobby people, Magnific is a pretty good way of sort of taking your older Midjourney images and giving them a fresh coat of paint, as Julie W. Design did here by taking this older, it looks like maybe Midjourney 5.1 image, and then running that through Magnific. And you can see it definitely does improve across the board. Now, I do want to point out, because I always get yelled at in the comments for this one, Magnific is not free. And actually, the pricing plan is a bit on the high side, starting at $39 per month and going up to $299 per month. And listen, I know that's a lot. My hope is at some point, some enterprise customers will end up joining on and more users will join on, and hopefully that will allow the price to come down, or perhaps even a lower tier. Moving on to AI art kerfluffle news, Wizards of the Coast, the owners of the card game Magic the Gathering, a game that I never played because, well, I suck at regular cards. I can't handle spells in cards as well. They ended up taking a pretty hard stance on AI-generated imagery, stating, "Our internal guidelines remain the same with regard to artificial intelligence tools. We require that artists, writers, and creatives contributing to Magic the Card Gathering," I think it is, TCG? The Card Gathering? Sure. To refrain from using AI generative tools to create final Magic products. Well, except fans were very quick to notice that AI generated assets were used in a social media ad campaign for Magic the Gathering. Taking a quick look, I mean, to my eye, it definitely looks more along the lines of Adobe's generative fill than it does, say, Midjourney. And I do think it's important to note that the cards themselves do have traditionally created art. Now, Wizards of the Coast initially denied the accusation, which probably wasn't a good look because it didn't take long before somebody took this image and pointed out details like this. Now, what's sort of funny about that to me is the fact that you actually still do have accurate numbers on this side, meaning that whoever was the artist on this probably did take some time doing some additional touch-up work. Wizards of the Coast did then issue a statement essentially pinning this whole thing on a vendor that they were using, but it is clear to me see that whatever artist was working for this vendor definitely did put in some time and work on this. I mean, we do have correct text here. The plasma ball, sure, that looks, fairly Firefly-esque, but, choices had to be made in terms of placing these cards. It does look like some shadow was also added in there as well. This isn't a case where, someone just prompted 4 magic cards sitting on a magical shelf and ended up with this image. I guess the irony in the whole thing is the fact that having this anti-AI art policy has ultimately ended up getting, some artist working for a vendor in trouble or, possibly fired. So we fired a human so that the AI wouldn't replace them. I don't know if the person got fired. I certainly hope that the person did not get fired. In Holodeck news, Meta have released audio to photoreal embodiments, which basically takes audio and turns them into photorealistic animated character avatars.
Like 10 years now, I've led movies, features.
Yes,
before.
weren't you in that feature last year? You were like the main supporting. I mean, not lead, but you were supporting to the main. That was.
Yeah. That was me.
So why are you?
That has definitely come a ways from those like Sims AI avatars that Zuck was trying to push on us like a year or two back. Additionally, over at CES right now, we have the Holo box, which, apparently is a box that will generate a hologram of you. I mean, it is hard to tell what the overall quality of, considering that this is obviously a 2D video. It does look like it's just front facing. There's that camera that guy just pointed to there. So I don't know if it's doing a full 360, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. If you've ever wanted to talk to yourself standing in an empty refrigerator, your time is coming. And I'm not going to get too crazy with CES stuff. I mean, obviously every tech media outlet in the world is there right now covering it. But I did want to point out that Apple is releasing the Apple Vision Pro that is going to be in stores in February to demo. And additionally, Sony has released their XR headset as well, utilizing the Snapdragon processor. It's just an interesting flex on their part, considering that they already have the PSVR. So I don't know. It definitely looks like VR is going to be a pretty massive push towards the holodeck coming this year. Finally, rounding out, last week I did a whole deep dive tutorial on how to create consistent AI characters in Scenario. Scenario actually reached out. We got to chatting via email, and they actually had a couple of tips and tricks. And one thing that I got wrong that I definitely wanted to share with you guys. So obviously, you'll probably want to have watched that first video. It is linked down below, so you can watch that and then come back and check this part out. So starting off, I guess, with my kind of mistake, I had initially said that you could take one of your character's full body turnarounds and then just kind of shrink them down into the bounding box, and that it, the white on the side probably wouldn't matter. As it turns out, that is actually not the case. Scenario did point out that sort of the white background in the bounding box does have an effect on your overall model, and what they would recommend doing is either knocking out the background or finding a similar color tone for what you are trying to relatively achieve with your model. Additionally, a number of you were having some issues in terms of creating like sort of colorfully garmented characters. The solution to that is actually just to take the template model and literally just paint over them. And apparently you really don't have to do it that well. And then if you prompt correctly, you should be able to get a character with that attribute. So trying that out really quickly, and very terribly painting some blue jeans on our template character, bringing him back over to Scenario, using him as an image reference, and then using the model cell shaded icon stylizer along with the prompt handsome surfer, blue jeans, tan skin, blonde hair, and then weighting the front view, back view, and side view prompts with 3 parentheses open, 3 parentheses closed, and then running that. And that got us this, which is, pretty accurate. He might not be as tan as I had necessarily expected, but, obviously bare feet there, no shirt. Now, there are other generations in this series in which he was more tan. And, in this one, he's wearing a shirt. We've got a shirtless bro here, no shoes on. And lastly, anime Steve Rogers, who apparently is wearing shoes, blue shoes in this one, blue denim shoes on with denim. All right. One thing that I did forget to mention in the initial video as well is that if you find a character that you kind of are okay with, like we're going to take anime Steve Rogers here, you can always download him, bring him in as a reference image, add in prompts, and then, generate again from there. And again, I want to point out it is still AI. It does take a little bit to get to. Like, we did not end up with an Aloha shirt in any of these until the last one where we got almost an Aloha shirt. So it still will take some work in terms of generating to get the character that you are looking for. But once you actually go through this process, you then have the character. Scenario did have a number of other tips and tricks for me that I will share with you in kind of probably more of a dedicated video. On that note, that is it for me today. I thank you so much for watching. My name is Tim.